With 5,000 people a week now dying in the United Kingdom, there's something else which is killing just as many people right now. What is it, you say? Another virus? No, it's the government lockdown itself. This is the beautiful truth on lockdown lunacy.
You are on the next level. This is The Beautiful Truth, where the expression is still free.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5.
And you are very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth with Fintan Dunne reporting on the 17th of April at 2 Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT, with news that a pathologist in the United Kingdom, a Professor John Lee, has on TV stated that there is an equal number of people dying from all other causes now in a sudden surge of unexpected deaths as there are dying in the United Kingdom from COVID-19. Here it is from the Professor himself.
Of the excess deaths that have been measured in the UK, about half of those are not due to COVID. So this is evidence of harms as a direct result of people not being able or not accessing healthcare because of the COVID lockdown and because of the way health resources have been reallocated.
Right, we'll come back to Professor Lee, who should now be called Professor Bruce Lee, because he's just kicked such a hole in the paradigm which we've been following on the justification for lockdowns. Just check it out here. Could it actually be? There's the stats for the United Kingdom. And here you see that currently the number of deaths are running at 14,500. It's roughly 5,000 a week deaths have been running at. Okay, so now here is the kind of data that our pathologist professor works off all the time. He's interested in what kills people, not just coronavirus. That's what he studies. And here is the Public Health Authority of England all-cause mortality report, 16th of April for week 16. And as you can see here in this graph, over on the right-hand side here is the sudden spike. Yes, they say, that's the coronavirus spike then, isn't it, that I'm looking at there? Is it now the coronavirus spike? It's not. Take a look at the seasonality of this graph first as we go along here now, as it looks back through 2016, 17, 18 and 19. And you see the peaks in the graph here, just below my cursor, where there was a winter spike in deaths, which there usually is and mostly caused by influenzas. And that was a pretty bad spike there in 2016 into 17, and there was an even bigger one in 2017 coming into 18, mild enough for the last two, except here we go now with the big spike, taking us from what's usually about 10,000 deaths a week in the United Kingdom from all-cause mortality into this sudden surge to what, 10,000 plus the 5 we calculated, bringing us to 15? No, 15 would be about there on the graph. There's another 5,000 there. For what reason? Well, for all sorts of reasons. That's what reason. Unreal. And this lockdown hysteria didn't happen by accident either. It happened by design, and I'll come back to that. But let's get some more from Dr. Lee as he debates with a lockdown fascist called Professor Luke O'Neill.
And I would like to say about this better safe than sorry principle that was just mentioned, this is often known as the precautionary principle. And the thing is, it's all very well if you are better safe than sorry, but what if you're worse safe than sorry? You simply can't ignore the effects of the lockdown on absolutely everything else. You can't just focus on the COVID numbers and say, because people are dying of a new virus, because we're not used to counting it in this way, because we're not used to seeing so many people dying, we better just do this precautionary thing and just shut down the entire economy and trash our entire way of life and actually make our healthcare less able to deal with all the things we currently are dealing with because it might be better for the virus. I'm afraid that isn't a scientific response to it. It's actually it's a sort of a non-scientific response. One can understand the desire to be cautionary, but the fact is when you don't know the facts, it's difficult to know what is cautionary and what isn't.
Good call, Professor O'Neill, and he's a constant apologist, isn't he, for the pharmaceutical sector, and there's just so many people like this who are trotting out one side of the story, and they're actually ignorant and blind to the other side of the story. And that's what happened there. You got somebody showing up as blind. You can get the full interview there. I've uploaded it, and it's on Vimeo, and you can check that out at your leisure and see the full interview and debate between those two. So I'm going to get on to who engineered this, but let's just consider the lockdown aspects before we leave them now. So where are we now? Well, if you're lucky, you'll eventually get to phase 2. WHO guidelines are even worse than this, but if you've declining cases for 2 weeks, you'll eventually get from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. Well, Sweden are already at this phase 2 and looser, where 50 people at a max is the number in a gathering, and where schools are back. They're already at that. How are they doing then without the severe lockdown and without decimating their economy to the same extent? Well, there's their cases. And as I've been highlighting, those cases are declining since the figures for April 9th, as we see that we have a slight downward trend in the stats. We certainly have level. It is not going through the roof. Where's the exponential rise in Sweden? Because they've been so dumb they haven't followed on lockstep with the rest of us in this lockdown. It's not there. What about their intensive care admissions? Take a look at the graph. Clear downward trend. I know we're getting high deaths coming out of Sweden now, and we're going to get that everywhere because it's into the institutions, care institutions for the elderly now, which we should have been protecting from the beginning. It's breached those care institutions in many nations, and so you can't really compare nations really, because it all is now going to depend on how you're getting on with protecting the vulnerable in the care homes. So there is no evidence there, as you can see, that there is a problem with Sweden's approach, one which has had them at phase 2 since the very beginning of this problem, using distancing. And here are the stats from Google Mobility Analysis, which shows you in Sweden how transit has been affected. Transit stations down 37% because of their reductions, social distancing, reductions in contact without a lockdown. Transit stations down 37%, workplaces down 18%, and residential is up 6%. Let's compare that, 37, 18, and 6, to Michigan. 51, not 37, in transit reduction. Workplaces gone from 18 to 45, and residential gone from 6 in Sweden to 16 in Michigan. It's even worse in New York, where the transit stations drops even further. Residential is 18. So there you see the intensity of effect on the population from New York to Michigan and then Sweden. And yet Sweden is managing to achieve substantially the same results without the same economic damage. And the economic damage is considerable. Here's a brief clip from the same show, an RTE documentary, highlighting the differences between the Swedish and Irish response and the economic consequences of that.
This recession will be unique. Unique because it will be caused by our government and governments around the world ordering builders to stop building, manufacturers to stop making, and retailers to stop selling, in the hope that strangling business life will suffocate the spread of the virus. Most Europeans are now living in lockdown, but not all. Like Ireland, Sweden's pandemic policies are led by public health officials. Some advice is the same. Before Easter, the King of Sweden made a public address urging Swedes to stay at home. But unlike Ireland, Swedish creches and schools for children up to 15 years old remain open. In Dublin, and this is what the lunchtime rush now looks like. Not having an economic lockdown like this in Sweden has so far limited the damage to their economy. On Tuesday, Sweden's Labour Board predicted unemployment would rise to 10% from 7% before the crisis. Others foresee a more significant jump, but nothing like the 5-fold spike in unemployment predicted in Ireland.
We are presenting a new forecast at the end of the month, and I think that we will increase unemployment forecast somewhere between 10 and 15%. It's very, very, very difficult to say how high unemployment may reach.
So there you go, folks. You see, you can add this to the coronavirus total. And you can add this to the additional 5,000 deaths a week in the United Kingdom on top of the 5,000 deaths, so that the total price you're paying now for saving the 5,000 is you're paying another 5,000 of consequential deaths in others whom you weren't attending to, and increased mortality through suicide, strokes, and all sorts of other unattended problems. Plus, you're creating a harvest of tragedy for the future with unemployment rates which are looking like this. So tell me which part of lockdown isn't lunacy, because at this stage, it's all looking pretty crazy. But it has a kind of logic to it. Let me explain with this. An observation in an article by Professor Lee in The Spectator. The COVID-19 crisis took the world by surprise, and the world, Sweden excepted, has reacted in roughly the same way, with lockdowns. In the rush, the usual checks and balances have not been applied. Well, yeah, they sort of haven't been applied, but it wasn't entirely a rush. Sweden accepted. Let's deal with that. That's because the Swedes have always done it like this. That's how they deal with epidemics of winter flu or whatever comes along, Hong Kong flu or the other ones that have come along. They deal with it like this, without this kind of hysteria. So where did this lockdown come from globally? Where did the same kind of messages coming out of the same kind of people in the supermarkets as you walk around, and the same kind of signaling taking place, where did all that come out of? Where indeed? Well, it came out of the whole WHO, who should now be renamed the BCO, Bunch of Crooks organization, because them and the pharmaceutical companies have prepared a knee-jerk reaction. You know what a knee-jerk reaction is? When the doctor taps you on the knee and your leg just pops. You can't help it. It's just a knee-jerk reaction. It's an automatic reaction. You see, what they did was Gates and the pharma people and WHO, Bunch of Crooks organization, have been having these symposiums and seminars and preparedness seminars and in exotic places all around the world, and public representatives and governments have been invited to these too. And just in case, a schedule has been laid down, a best practice has been laid down. And everybody, you see, when the emergency hits then, and people in politics suddenly turn around to go, which way do I go here, what do I do? Along comes the advisor from the Department of Health, who were in bed with the pharmaceutical industry since way back before you were even born, and says, no worries, we have a plan here actually, which we fortunately prepared earlier with the help of our friends in the pharmaceutical industry and very good donors around the planet who are helping us out with this very important work, just in case this kind of thing would ever happen. Because just in case this kind of thing would ever happen, the objective of the plan is to make sure that nobody gets natural immunity, that everybody goes into lockdown. Because this maximizes, of course, the potential market for any possible vaccine. Now, you might say, hold on a second, a bunch of crooks organization and other people in the pharmaceutical industry and bureaucrats in our governments wouldn't just get together and blindly go down this route without considering whether, in fact, this kind of approach benefited the population at large and was a good public health policy approach. Well, no, that never happened, you see. Because all of this happened outside of the normal bureaucratic structures. All of this happened in this preparedness structure, which has been rolled out globally by the corporates, by the pharmaceutical sector, by the Bunch of Crooks organization, and by individual administrators in your local friendly government. And that's why everybody then jumped lockstep into it without thinking it's the best thing to do. So there's the spike, folks. There's the spike, which now you are among the few who know that that spike is twice as big as it could potentially have been if we'd done something differently. What could we have done differently? How could we have handled this in a different manner? The government's immediately jumping in and saying, we had to lock down, it would have gone through the roof. Well, no, you had to do something, social distancing, which Sweden did. You didn't have to lock down, you had to do something. Yes, we all had to do something to slow it down. We didn't want all those deaths arriving at once. But our capacity to deal with that over time has got to be gauged very carefully. And that doesn't seem has been done. I've also uploaded the documentary on Sweden v Ireland, comparison of the two approaches, and you'll find the links to that and anything else, including those mortality statistics for the UK, linked in the description below. We'll go out with some words from Professor Lee, as he reminds us that barely a day goes by without a politician saying that they will be led by the science. What we're seeing with COVID-19 is not science in action. Science involves matching theories with evidence and testing a theory with attempts to falsify it so that it can be refined to better match reality. A theory from a group of scientists is just that, a theory. Believing the opinion of that group without a critical verification process is just that, belief. You see? So that's what we've been getting. We've been getting belief and not science. Because, I believe whatever these people walk in and tell me that their theory is about what the best way to handle all this. Can't do that. This is the science. Sweden, daily new cases of COVID-19 graph and how that graph goes. We are now about a week since it looks like it may be topped out. So, unlike as it says in some of the documentary content I've linked to there, where experts say, well, we'll all find out in years to come, I'm sure, whether Sweden got... We won't find out in years to bloody come whether Sweden got it right. We need to find out in days to come whether Sweden got it right, not weeks to come. We need to act. We need to observe this kind of data coming out, and we need to act on that when we see it's convincing. And right now, this data from Sweden, his data from the actual mortality, and also our knowledge of the damage and harm we're inflicting long-term and the short-term unemployment we're inflicting. We need to move to a model, a different model. We need to bring in a Swedish model, as the bishop said to the actress. Because the current model is killing us, folks. And it's killing us just like 2008, I think, just like the financial crash, where what happened was we had a crisis. And instead of bailing out Main Street, we bailed out the corporates, we bailed out the banksters. And here we are again, and the politicians are again being led by the nose, except this time it's the bunch of crooks organisation and the pharmaceutical sector and the corporates in general and media who are having a party running this steamroller. And it's steamrollering all over your jobs. And it will steamroller all over your children's jobs too, and your future. This is the payoff. This is the wages of sin. What sin? The sin of letting the pharmaceutical sector loose. They're really going to do it now. It's not enough that in the United States, for example, they're now gobbling up around about a sixth of the economy. No. You let this beast loose long enough and eventually it'll turn around and really bite you on the ass, and it's just done so. This is a game changer, and it's time that we change the game. I'll be back with more very soon. Thanks for the encouragement, folks. Great to be here with you and great to be on air and still on air on breakfornews.com. I'll be back very soon with more. I hope you can join me for that. But in the meantime, this has been Fintan Dunne reporting.